Look, Epcot as a park probably shouldn't even exist. It was an idea that only could have been born out of the very specific situation that the Disney company found themselves in post-Walt. The park opened with a goal at its core of edutainment, or the crossroads of education and entertainment. Learning was at the heart of Epcot, whether that be learning about the cultures in World Showcase, or the history and future of technology in Future World. But over the years, Disney would reshape Epcot many times, making the central theme less and less prominent, with this especially obvious in the latest reimagining that just finished in 2024. At the core of that overhaul was the new slogan and core message for the park, the magic of possibility, which I don't think is a good representation of the park currently. However, I do think Epcot itself has the magic of possibility. As a whole, Epcot still has a strong foundation and one of the most unique collections of rides in the world. While right now the house sitting on the foundation can be described as messy at best, it has the potential to find a renaissance the next time it gets reimagined. The unique edutainment model of Epcot stemmed from the tumultuous development the park was a result of. Epcot was born out of a desire to honor Walt's final big idea, but this idea was just not something that could be carried out without its visionary leading it. Epcot was a dream too big for Disney to do without Walt, and so it went on the back burner. Roy Disney would helm the company and lead the creation of Walt Disney World with the East Coast Disneyland Walt had planned, but behind the scenes, those who worked with Walt grappled with the idea of how to honor the Epcot plans in a way they could actually pull off.
I'm Card Walker, president of Walt Disney Productions, and I'd like to answer a question that's been asked many times about Epcot. Why is Disney getting into so many things that are apparently unrelated to the entertainment industry? What can Disney possibly contribute?
Epcot will be a community of ideas, a public forum for information transfer about emerging new technologies, prototype systems, and promising new concepts.
With the success of the Magic Kingdom, people like Card Walker led a charge within the company to not let Epcot die, and began leading concepts for what an Epcot that still honored Walt's vision could look like. They wanted Epcot to be a place for new prototypes and concepts to be demonstrated, a place for different walks of life to meet and exchange ideas, a beacon of innovation, and a place where the average person could experience the world around them in a new way. While what they were planning for Epcot wasn't the city that Walt dreamt, it tried to capitalize on Walt's love for the World's Fair concept and turn the idea into a permanent version of that. In the development process, there was a divide between the idea for a cultural-focused World Showcase and a technology corporate-focused Future World. And what we would end up with was basically those two ideas sandwiched together, basically two parks that shared the thread of learning about our world and its past and future. This is why the park had this major theme of learning, because at its core, it was about seeing the future we as a society were building and the people who made up the world around us. The overarching goal for the park was that guests were going to leave it with a better understanding of the world. It had an education focus not by circumstance, but by choice. This was only compounded by the sponsorship model the park opened with. Basically, every major aspect of the park was sponsored by some sort of corporation that was somehow fitting of its theme. These companies had a say in what their pavilion would feature, and as a result, a lot of them wanted guests to be excited about what was to come in the future by learning about just how far we've come.
Instead of Cinderella's castle, Spaceship Earth, the world's largest geosphere, guides you to Future World, Epcot's Dazzler. 5 huge pavilions house a combination of films, rides, and special Disney effects. Besides Exxon and General Motors, a number of companies have sponsored exhibits at Epcot. Industry puts up some of the money and lets Disney tell the story.
Opening day rides like World of Motion brought guests through the history of transportation and left guests with the excitement of what was next, and then brought them into an exhibit showing just that. Spaceship Earth did the same with communication, and the Universe of Energy with, well, energy. The Land and the Seas brought guests through a greenhouse and an aquarium respectively. And Journey into Imagination and slightly later Horizons took a more abstract approach to making guests excited about creating the future and living in it. Meanwhile, in the World Showcase, the only ride there was in Mexico, with every other pavilion relying on the exhibits, restaurants, and atmosphere to be the attraction. When Epcot opened in 1982, every aspect of it touched on finding a new entertaining way to educate and inspire its guests. For its first experiment with a park outside of the castle mold, Imagineers found a winning strategy for the time. Epcot contrasted the Magic Kingdom completely, but in a way that was complementary to it. While Magic Kingdom was full of fairy tales and imagination, Epcot was grounded in reality. It created a resort with much more to offer than just the Magic Kingdom alone could. This all led to a park that was a success. Well, maybe not financially for a little bit with its astronomical construction costs, but culturally it was a hit and set the parks division on a path to expansion.
It's nice the way they take you through the funny side of it first and then bring you into the educational side after. I think that's a good idea.
I thought it was great. It was really entertaining. I liked all the caricatures and showed you the history of the vehicles. And it was really good, and the kids liked it too.
I like going through the tunnel, actually, with all the lights and everything, and the cars at the end. They are beautiful.
Well, I like the idea of what's happening in the future. My favorite part was the public transportation of the future and also the automobiles of the future.
The new concept cars that they have now, they're very interesting.
It's just fun. It's, a lot of different things and a lot to see.
There's something for everybody here.
The next decade for Epcot after its opening would keep its direction clear. Epcot wasn't trying to compete with the rides of Magic Kingdom and strived to maintain this expo feel to it. Even as Eisner took over the Disney company, Epcot was largely left to its own devices during his early years. The Morocco Pavilion was a unique addition, with the country itself not just sponsoring it, but also taking a very active role in development and construction. This followed with Norway being sponsored by a conglomerate of companies from the country, and it included Maelstrom, which was touted as Epcot's first thrill ride. The ride was able to stray away a bit from the edutainment model, but just a bit. It took inspiration from folktales and used time travel to take you from the early Viking days to modern Norway. This resulted in a somewhat disjointed story, with the climax of the ride being a drop into a storm with an oil rig, and a planned Tesla coil that thankfully did not make it out of the planning stages. Over in Future World, the addition of Captain EO was one of the first Eisner-feeling additions to the park. But with it being a part of the Imagination Pavilion, it wasn't too much of a stretch since that was already the most abstract part of the park. The other major addition to Future World during this era was the Wonders of Life Pavilion, which was just a natural extension of the edutainment concept. It taught guests about the human body and health, and included a more thrilling simulator ride through the human body and Body Wars. Epcot in the 80s was arguably the most unique but shockingly cohesive theme park ever constructed. It had this balance of education and entertainment that was so clearly a product of the 80s, but also had a timeless charm to it. While some people may not have gotten Epcot, those who did fell in love with it.
Inventions is a kind of a word that combines invention and innovation. It's actually the new core of Epcot Center at Walt Disney World in Florida, and it really deals with the near future. What's going to happen to all of us in our lives tomorrow, next month, next year, but not 20 years out.
But as Eisner's tenure continued, the Walt Disney World Resort took on a different direction as it became the theme park capital of the world. While Epcot was unique and an incredible theme park, it relied on sponsorship and regular updates to keep things on the cutting edge and update the educational aspects within. Educational content isn't something that can just be created and left for 40 years. Imagine learning from a textbook from the 1980s today. So when it came time for Epcot's attractions to get their first real refresh, this is when that Eisner feel kind of came to the park. Eisner had a desire for thrills and rides that appealed to people of every age in the parks. For Epcot, this led to rides that still tied into the original themes, but took a more 90s exciting approach like Test Track and, in theory, Journey into Your Imagination, but that one just missed the mark completely. Then you have Ellen's Energy Adventure bringing actors from the current entertainment landscape into the rides for better or for worse. And Mission Space bringing a maybe too extreme thrill ride to the park as a complete replacement for Horizons, and changing the theme from dreaming about the future to space travel. While these additions muddied Epcot's theme slightly, overall Epcot was still marketed and viewed as the learning park. This had its benefits as a park that adults flocked to, but also had its drawbacks as its reputation as a park that wasn't great for kids grew. By the year 2000, the internet and technology had made edutainment something that kids were interacting with at home and in the classroom. This kept that not kid-friendly reputation growing for Epcot, And I know I'm massively oversimplifying this, but if I went into detail about these societal changes and how people consumed educational content after the internet, this video would be like 7 hours long and totally off topic. So essentially, Disney was worried about Epcot not resonating with kids and the potential future for the edutainment model dying out, which led to early plans for a reimagined Future World as a whole. Project Gemini would touch basically the entirety of Future World, taking away that future branding and taking the Discovery theming from Disneyland Paris and applying it here. This would avoid that constant need to reinvent. And even a ride like Spaceship Earth would have been replaced by a time-traveling roller coaster. While the project didn't come to fruition, aspects of it would in the coming years, such as the IP invasion of the living seas and a clone of soaring over California and the land. One of the many reasons the project didn't come to fruition as a whole was that the sponsorship model was showing signs of failing by the mid-2000s. Epcot sponsorships were originally seen as a great way to get good PR for your company and be prominent in the minds of millions of guests who visit the park. But the internet made that a lot easier to do in a far more targeted and way cheaper way. The value of an Epcot sponsorship dropped substantially, and as a result, the park lost a substantial amount of reliable income, and Disney found themselves on the hook for the future of the park. So by the time the 2010s rolled around, it was kind of clear that Epcot at best was charmingly dated, and in need of some major refurbishment. At the time, even the most diehard Epcot fans would admit that the park was just not in the best shape, and an investment into an overhaul would benefit it greatly. Soon enough, we would get that overhaul.
Now, some of you may have been there when I said that the teams are thinking big when it comes to Epcot. Today we'll give you a peek at some of what we are doing, so you can imagine just how big we're thinking. Now, our work on the park is centered around a few guiding principles. We want to keep it true to the original vision, while making it more timeless, more relevant, more family, and more Disney. We're also ensuring that these plans incorporate what we've been hearing from our guests, especially from our families with young children. They love Epcot, but they wanted to have a little bit more of that Disney wow factor. Okay, so this really is just the tip of the iceberg of what we've got in store for Epcot. Transforming that special park in preparation for Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary is going to be a very big priority for us.
At D23 in 2017, Disney announced Project Gamma, which was a complete reimagining of Epcot. Just a year before, Frozen Ever After had replaced Maelstrom in the Norway Pavilion, and many had sensed that it was the start of something new for the park. By 2019, we got specifics on what was announced, and basically all the park was going to be involved in some way. So I just want to give a brief rundown of what we ended up getting from these plans. Starting with the death of Future World. In its place would be 3 neighborhoods instead: Discovery, Celebration, and Nature, to subdivide that former land. Much of the branding around these neighborhoods was updated to a new visual identity that closely mirrored what the park had opened with, and the front entrance removed those Leave Legacy monoliths and replaced them with the Pillar Fountain once again. Spaceship Earth got points of light where its panels meet, which allow for shows and just a general atmosphere at night. Right behind Spaceship Earth, the former Innovations East got replaced with the new quick services and a main gift shop for the park, while Innovations West was replaced with the Journey of Water walkthrough attraction and Communicore Plaza and Hall. In between the two, the Fountain of Nations was replaced with gardens and a lot of outdoor seating. In World Nature, the land would see its film offerings swapped from the Circle of Life into Awesome Planet. In World Discovery, Mission Space got Space 220, and right before all these changes, the refreshed Mission Green for the attraction. Also in World Discovery, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind would replace Ellen's Energy Adventure and completely change the pavilion's theme and give Epcot its first ever roller coaster and IP-based Future World Pavilion. Back in World Showcase, the Circle Vision 360 movie in Canada was updated to Canada Far and Wide, and in France, a Beauty and the Beast sing-along would take over a majority of their theater's showings throughout the day. Also in France, the back of the pavilion was expanded to lead to Remy's Ratatouille Adventure and the Creperie. Then, in the center of the lagoon, a new nighttime show, Harmonious, would take place following a temporary show, Epcot Forever, to bridge the gap between Harmonious and Illuminations. Then, Epcot Forever would come back, and Harmonious would be replaced by Luminous before the reimagining was even over. Now, what we didn't end up getting from these announced plans is also kind of a long list. So for starters, in World Showcase, China was supposed to get a new Circle Vision film called Wondrous China. Also in the UK, their pavilion was supposed to get an expansion and a Mary Poppins ride, which we ended up later finding out would have been a Teacups ride. Up in Future World, the former Wonders of Life pavilion was set to be replaced by the Play Pavilion. This pavilion would have kept the bones of the building, but inside would have been an interactive city with a bunch of Disney and Pixar characters, and it used a lot of emojis in its promotion. Now, in the time since its closure as Wonders of Life until the reimagining began, the building itself actually served as the center for Epcot's festivals. So with the loss of it, they planned on building a large 2-story festival center at the back of Future World just before World Showcase. Then, on the other side of Future World, Spaceship Earth itself was supposed to get a large-scale overhaul that would have changed it from a ride about communication into one about storytelling with a, quote, story light guiding the ride. I think you can tell by how I'm describing these changes that reception to the overhaul as a whole was not great. It didn't help that right after construction started, the pandemic just completely changed things. But at the same time, what we did get from the 2019 announcement didn't live up to the promise of a new Epcot. Don't get me wrong, most people liked aspects of the changes, and the park at least looks more upkept than it did before, but it's hard to say it lived up to the expectations that Disney and the public had set for it. So that's the very high-level overview of how we got to modern-day Epcot. I tried to keep it as simplified as possible because the park's history is just kind of crazy and super convoluted, and I really didn't want this video to just be the history of Epcot. What I really want to talk about is my problems with modern Epcot and whether or not I think the park in its current form is salvageable. So, getting into why I'm not a huge fan of Epcot's current state, let's just start with the obvious. The park is messy at best. Well, not physically for the most part, but as a theme park, Epcot really doesn't have this cohesive theme anymore. The edutainment theme that Epcot opened with has faded substantially over the years, and while some of the parks still has it, those are now the exceptions or relegated to experiences that a lot of guests will overlook. When Epcot opened, the edutainment experiences were the e-tickets, and it would be impossible to spend a day at Epcot without learning. As much as this is not a problem exclusive to Epcot, I think it hits this park particularly hard because of its scale and variety of experiences. Epcot's new slogan being the magic of possibilities is just incredibly vague, and it lacks that mission language that used to describe Epcot. The dedication plaque at the front entrance from 1982 sets a goal of entertaining, informing, inspiring, and instilling a sense of belief and pride in humanity. This was clearly reflected within the park and summed up its offerings perfectly. I don't think the magic of possibility sums up Epcot the same way. If Disney wants to hold on to the brand and some of the rides of early Epcot and capitalize on that nostalgia, they need to find a way to make new additions that innovate on those original principles. This is not me saying that I think Epcot should have been frozen in time the day it opened and preserved. These parks are not museums, and especially Epcot needed updates with how technology and education has progressed. However, when Disney has tried to modernize Epcot, it always seems to come at the expense of what made the park so unique when it opened. Epcot is a uniquely hard park to overhaul. The park is, if we're being honest, probably too big. It's a lot easier to reinvent something like Hollywood Studios in a matter of years because of its size and that more flexible original theme, whereas Epcot's just a different animal. Whether or not people like the new version of Hollywood Studios is totally up for debate, but almost all, and soon to be basically all of the park, feels like it matches the idea of stepping into the world of movies. On the other hand, when Epcot has gotten these major changes, it's almost entirely done in Future World, while World Showcase gets minimal updates. It makes sense that this side would need more investment than World Showcase, but that also makes it feel like not a major overhaul when half the park is not going to feel different. Even in the most recent changes, we ended up getting Remy's in World Showcase, which is great and all, but it's just one small area in the back of the country. And the only other major addition to World Showcase that we were supposed to get in that reimagining was lost in the Mary Poppins ride. Then you also add in that we lost Spaceship Earth's overhaul, and I think that actually really hurt the project because I do think that had a chance to be this unique modern take on the Epcot classic and almost give a direction to the park. Now, could it have also ruined it? Sure, but I think the concept art was decent. As a whole, Epcot is a park that, even though I love it, it's really hard to recommend to more casual guests because it's a park that's not easy to grasp in its current form. It's hard to prepare someone for what the park is, and that can easily lead to misguided expectations and people struggling to take in the park as a whole. When parks are marketed using just characters and brands, so much of Epcot falls through the cracks. The other part of Epcot that really falls through for me is how much the festivals are used in their marketing, but how little they actually have to offer anymore. Take for example Food and Wine, which when I'm filming this just recently kicked off. At the festival you can get snacks and drinks from the booths and watch a concert on select days, and essentially, that's it. That's the festival. Compare that to 2014's Food and Wine Festival, where these were also things offered, but on top of that, they had low-cost culinary demonstrations every day, similar mixology seminars, free book signings with chefs and winemakers, free chocolate making demonstrations, and free cooking lessons. There were also a variety of additional special events throughout that had a separate cost, but tied back into the festival. Things like an experience for an upscale dinner through some of Walt's favorite dishes. Most of these events took place in the former Wonders of Life Pavilion and went away when construction began on the recent reimagining when that pavilion was supposed to become the Play Pavilion. This is why the Festival Center was a huge part of the new center of the park, and why it being removed from the plans and replaced by a too small hallway is such a problem for the park. As a whole though, Epcot right now doesn't have a central theme or idea, but I think it still does have the potential to be a place where education and entertainment collide in a unique way. The thing that gives me hope for the future of Epcot is that we've had some positive signs at the tail end of the last reimagining and since then. For starters, Journey of Water inspired by Moana is classic Epcot, teaching guests about the water cycle in a way that you could only experience and interact with like this at Epcot. What I love about it is that it proves that IP and character can still be blended into something that's grounded in our reality and still educational. Moana is the framework for the content and not the content itself. These two work hand in hand to create a walkthrough that allows parents to teach their kids something through their favorite movie. This really stood out as an anomaly of New Epcot with how restrained it was with its characters in a good way.
Epcot is always in a state of economy. We are constantly looking for ways that we can enhance our park.
And we have a long-standing relationship with Chevrolet, one of our corporate alliance partners who helps us do just that. They're very focused on innovation and the future of how we will travel across this planet of ours. Which is why I'm so pleased to tell you that we're working with Chevrolet to once again reimagine the test track experience. We're reaching back into the history of the pavilion, taking inspiration from the original World of Motion and bringing that spirit of optimism to this next iteration of test track.
The next positive sign to me is Test Track. The recent 3.0 refresh of the ride is what actually inspired this entire video. This whole project came right after the reimagining of the park was quote-unquote done, but it was kind of a different situation because GM is still one of the very few sponsors that are still heavily involved at Epcot, and they invested the money into a third refresh of Test Track just a little over a decade after its last update. When the update was announced, they showed one piece of concept art with a vehicle going through a forest scene and said the ride would harken back all the way to World of Motion. Then, once Test Track 3.0 opened, we realized that meant more than just Easter eggs, even if there are some fun Easter eggs throughout. What Test Track 3.0 did was harken back to World of Motion by teaching guests about transportation methods and incorporating learning into the ride itself. Test Track 1.0 did this in a way that guests learned how their vehicles were crash tested, but by Test Track 2.0 it was really just about testing a car that the guests designed, and there wasn't a lot of learning to it. The new version of the ride teaches guests about how the technology in their car works alongside the driver now. It also brings with it this Epcot futurism, teaching guests about new innovations that could be coming to cars and roads soon. The ride does this while still being the fun, thrilling test track that it was before, and it strikes this balance just incredibly well. The ride to me feels like what a modern, more thrilling take on a classic Epcot concept would be. Not just from a ride and story standpoint, but also from an aesthetic perspective. The scenes have this look to them that feel like they're that 1980s futurism, but still modern in a sense. Things are clean, but they're not like sterile, unlike a lot of the center of Epcot right now. Beyond Test Track though, I still think there are two Epcot festivals that are signs of a positive direction for the park. While both Festival of the Arts and Holidays lost things like the other two with the loss of the festival center space, their offerings were already more spread out, so we didn't lose as much of those offerings, and we didn't lose them to budget cuts, more importantly. Both Arts and Holidays still feel like festivals beyond the food to me, which goes back to the original intentions of why festivals are at Epcot. During Festival of the Holidays, World Showcase gets storytellers who teach guests about their country's holiday traditions, and you also have live performances of holiday music all around the park, even including the Candlelight Processional, which fits into the theme better than the concerts for Food and Wine and Flower and Garden. Then in Festival of the Arts, you have all the original art that can be found around World Showcase to purchase and often be able to talk with the artists themselves. Then you have the chalk art and the opportunity for kids to join in and draw on the pavement, as well as the Paint by Numbers mural where everyone can get involved. I also want to mention that during Festival of the Arts in 2024, we got hands down the best iteration of the Communicore Hall space. It was this unique walkthrough of memorabilia and behind-the-scenes pieces from Disney on Broadway, and it truly made the space feel like an exhibit and not just a hallway that it's felt like every other time. Now, it was likely paid for by Disney on Broadway's marketing budget, which is why it was so much stronger, but like Disney, you need to find the budget to properly use that flex space, especially now that we've seen what that space can become. The last positive sign I've noticed as of late is a reinvestment into the random streetmosphere around the park. You had Misinformation and Al roaming about for the summer. Then you had the Forces of Nature, which just recently went away, but I really thought they added a lot of kinetics to a part of the park that just really needs it. And then you also have the new Acrobatics Act in France, and the Janitor is being moved from the breezeway over by Connections to the Land and Seas area, making for a much better area to perform in and surprise and delight. All these little streetmosphere things just make the park feel a lot more alive and not as big as it feels. Overall, there are signs that Epcot is heading in a better direction than it was just a few years ago, but is it enough? So ultimately, can Epcot really be fixed? Yeah, I think these signs give me enough hope for the next time that Disney really looks Epcot's way. These steps forward make me think that at a high level, Disney does see areas where they've gone wrong at the park, and not just from the most recent round of changes. For example, they didn't only correct the issues of Test Track 2.0 with the new version, they also tied it into the original theme of Epcot more than the first version of Test Track did. Even steps like the new signage at the Seas and the return of the lockout shows are minor additions, but they go a long way. As a park, Epcot still has a strong foundation and an incredibly dedicated fan base. World Showcase is unlike anything else at a theme park and is truly something you wouldn't see created now. The countries themselves all have a lot of fleshed out educational aspects with exhibits, shops, and dining, which has made the additions of the rides a bit easier. While Remy's and Frozen aren't perfect, I don't think they fully take away from their respective pavilions as much as some think. And I'm okay with more rides coming into World Showcase to encourage guests to explore the pavilions more thoroughly. Then the front of the park is still Future World, it's just under a new coat of paint right now. If they put on another new coat of paint and brought back some more bold choices in design, I could see this return of a sense of future to the park and less of this outdoor mall feel that we have right now. Then each Future World pavilion could get some form of the Test Track 3.0 treatment, tying it back into the original core of Epcot, and it could bring this more evergreen and cohesive feel to the park. Originally, I've always thought that an updated version of the Carousel of Progress would fit in really well in the old Innoventions area, but with the refurb now coming, I don't see that one in the cards. But beside that, I think there are other things that should be high up on the list for future updates at Epcot, and the first of those being the Pixar Film Festival. I'd love to see this actually become more of a film festival with rotating shorts that showcase small filmmakers. Then, while you're at it, the rest of the Imagination Pavilion definitely deserves a facelift, including the ride. Then I think Mission Space as a pavilion is a good concept, but I think the ride and its approach to space travel falls flat. It went thrills first and sacrificed story for that. Space exploration is something that has so many stories that don't even need fiction to be captivating, and I think that could really serve as a strong basis for a new ride. Then over at Spaceship Earth, I still think the ride could use a retheme. maybe you look back at those 2019 plans and see how those could be, iterated on in a way that will keep the ride as the icon and statement piece for the park. I'd also love to see Epcot go in and totally reinvest in the festivals and bring back the hands-on experiences and demonstrations that went beyond what we have to offer right now. You could either build a new festival center or just utilize a space like the Odyssey for more than just a glorified festival booth. Make these festivals an experience and a reason to plan a trip and not just new menus. Speaking of the festival center though, we still have to do something with the Wonders of Life building. I personally was not really a fan of the play concept. I kind of thought it looked like what a corporate executive thought the internet and social media was, and it just radiated that Chapek awkwardness to me. But at the same time, I do like the idea of having a pavilion that incorporates a playground area for kids in some way. Right now, these are all kind of spread out randomly around Future World, and with the Florida weather, having some sort of obvious indoor play area for this wouldn't hurt. I also don't think a new version of the pavilion would even need an e-ticket ride in it. I think a C-ticket or even a stage show could do really well there. So that's just kind of some of the potential I see in the future for Epcot, and I hope that kind of illustrates why I do think that Epcot as a whole can be fixed and that the park isn't too far gone from being strong and cohesive. Now, do I think any large-scale changes to Epcot are imminent? No. Disney right now is much more focused on the other parks, especially Magic Kingdom, and I don't see them wanting to dump a ton of money into Epcot again anytime soon. But at the same time, I don't think that Epcot at its core is broken like some people worry it is. Most recently, Disney seems to be course-correcting their approach to the parks after their stumble out of the gate in the 2020s. Company-wide, there seems to be this awareness to the response of their projects that hasn't been there in years. We've seen kind of fan service things like the original Castle Colors returning, then you have Beacon Barrel's deep ties to the pirate's story, more peeks behind the curtains into the process, the revisions to Piston Peak concept art with more water elements added in, and Zootopia being contained to a very small area in Animal Kingdom and not getting this big full land. These are things that just make me more confident in the direction that Disney sees for the resort. All of this makes me excited for the next time that Epcot's on the table for Disney Imagineering. I think the next refresh of Epcot could bring a new generation to the park that strikes a balance between the modern theme park landscape and the original heart that made Epcot the most unique park in the world.
We call it Epcot.
Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me. It means a ton, and I really do appreciate it. So yeah, otherwise I don't have a lot more to add to Epcot. I think this is my general thoughts on it. As much as I love the park, it's just complicated. And I tried to be succinct on the history, so that way, if I did an Epcot history video, it would be like 17 hours, and there are people who are better equipped to do that. So I tried to keep it concise and more to just my opinion. So hope you guys liked it. If you did like it, click like, that helps out a ton. Subscribe if you want to see more from me, and comment your thoughts on Modern Epcot. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.
Who do you think the hottest girl in school is? The Epcot ball?